Welcome back. Happy Friday, everybody, and news of the day. Matt Tennyson is the only player that is on waivers today from the New Jersey Devils. Depth defenseman strictly, and I don't see any reason why he won't clear. It's just a sign that teams are getting healthier when we're starting to see guys go on waivers again. And yeah, most of them have already been on waivers at least once this year. So if they didn't get taken previously, odds are they probably don't get taken now. If you're a Caps fan, good news. Vanacek, who is playing better over the last few games, it seems like he played his way through that bad stretch. You know what's interesting is goalies used to do that. Way back in the day, goalies would just play their way through a bad stretch. It was just, you kind of understood. Yeah, it's an 80-game schedule. Guys have a bad stretch. And now with 24-hour media and everybody going over everything that a goaltender does with a fine-tooth comb, it's just people aren't patient anymore. But anyways, Vanacek, who's been rounding into form, he's going to get some rest. Ilya Samsonov has been called up. Craig Anderson's been returned to the taxi squad. And so Samsonov will be starting pretty darn soon here. And we'll see how the battle for the Capitals net goes from here. Again, Vanacek's been good the last few games. We'll see if they have a 50-50 split or how they're going to do it. I would not be surprised if it's a 50-50 split and starts. Interestingly enough, Barry Trotz not overly impressed with Kiefer Bellows and didn't mind calling him out. And it's interesting too, because Barry Trotz is one of those coaches that he will call players out and people kind of accept it and go, well, he won a Stanley Cup in 2018, so he knows what he's doing. And he mentioned how Del Cole was able to play a good role on the second line, no problem, and that he's been able to slide players in there. But last night, Kiefer Bellows, he was a -2 and played a total of 7 minutes and 47 seconds. Had 2 shifts in the third, and Trotz basically said, that he had a chance here and he failed to capture it. So we'll see whether or not Bellows is in the long-term plans for the New York Islanders, and or whether or not he ends up going down on a conditioning stint or what happens. But it's also possible that after being called out by the coach, he comes back in the next game, plays really, really well. For Bellows, I do think the talent's there. I think it may very well be a matter of, and I've said this before, some players come into the league and they just aren't able to take that next step to become a really good NHLer. They come in and their talent level kind of stays the same throughout. They're not able to make those improvements. And the guys who don't make those improvements have shortened NHL careers. So Dallas, I'm wearing Dallas. Obviously Dallas with numerous games being postponed and pushed back, and the NHL announcing a bunch of reschedulings and all of that. Dallas ends up with 44 games in 78 days. It's brutal. Jamie Benn's already said, yep, we knew this would happen before the season started. We knew we were in for a brutal schedule. And 44 games in 78 days. That's a lot of games in very few days. That's insane. And they used as an example that in 2018-2019, their final 44 games were in 99 days. So, and that was considered kind of busy. And this is going to be crazy. And we'll see. Because again, at the end of this season, every team is going to have had a brutal schedule. Every team is going to have had a really brutal stretch of games. And whoever emerges as the Stanley Cup champion this year, nothing but mad respect for him. Speaking of games being moved around, there was a game scheduled for tomorrow between Chicago and Chicago and Carolina, sorry. And Chicago, they haven't had any postponements yet. So the NHL's looking at their schedule and they're seeing the same teams getting games rescheduled over and over again. And they're trying to find more ability to move games around with what they have left in terms of time. So they've delayed that game, and instead Tampa's going to play Carolina tomorrow, starting at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern. So they've changed the game. So technically they postponed the Chicago-Carolina, but they're keeping Tampa-Carolina. And again, I would not be surprised to see this happen with other games in divisions where they're trying to make up games. Whether it's the East, whether it's the Central, we'll probably see some other movement as well. Because, there are some teams that have played maybe 8 or 9 games less than their divisional rivals. And it does make the schedule kind of lopsided. So, that game gets delayed to, I think it's, well, they haven't announced the date that they postponed this to. So basically, they just put Tampa, Carolina for tomorrow, move that up from March 28th, and they're like, we'll do the Chicago, Carolina later. We'll figure it out. Whoever's working to put together the schedule, at this point, I assume they're just using duct tape and willpower to keep everything together. They have my mad respect for being able to do this. Crazy. The Anaheim Ducks have come out and said they're unlikely to ask Ryan Getzlaf to waive his no movement clause. So between now and July, I think it's July 15th, somewhere around there, teams are able to ask players, hey, can you waive your no movement clause for the Seattle expansion so that we can have you on the exposed list? I don't think Anaheim has any issues in terms of who they may or may not be able to protect. So it makes sense to me that they're saying, yeah, we're not going to ask Getzlaf about the no movement clause. There will be some players who get asked, and there are going to be some players who say no. But there will also be some players who look at their contract and say, yeah, I'll waive it. I know I'm not going anywhere, but I'll waive it. And then, of course, Seattle, if they were to pick those players up, the no movement clause goes back into effect, I believe, when they get to Seattle. But either way, it's neither here nor there right now. That's something we'll get into more as we get closer to the expansion draft and we see who is or isn't on the list. But apparently, the Ducks have no problem with protecting Getzlaf. Makes sense. He's their captain. He's been there for a very long time. You want to show the guys some respect and say, we're not going to ask you to waive. Most of the players in Anaheim, it seems that they'd want to protect are probably exempt anyways from being first or second year players. Kudos to the National Hockey League and its players as well. And I mean this. Yesterday's COVID-19 list, you'll notice we haven't been talking about new players going on. Yesterday there was one that went on, Andrew Hammond. Yesterday's list went down to 13 players league-wide on the list. So I think this is a combination of things. One, the new stricter guidelines by the NHL, and two, I think players taking it more seriously. We saw that in baseball. We saw it in football. The outbreaks take place and players go, okay, we've got to take this seriously. We're not going to be able to finish the season. And now we're down to 13 players in a 31-team league that were on the list yesterday, which is the smallest that's been since the season started. So, good job. And remember, there are numerous ways you can end up on that list. So the fact that they were down to 13, that's very good news. And I don't want to jinx it, so I'll just leave it at that. But for players who are making the needed sacrifices right now to make this work, I appreciate it. I know that a lot of fans appreciate it as well. And yeah, it's good news that list is down as low as it is, because then we should be able to get the season done if players are able to keep that trend going. So, good news. So we're going to come back to the Arizona story because it's got legs. And so anybody who thought, hey, Alex Meruelo brings out this statement, that's going to cut it off. That's it. The Arizona Coyotes have threatened legal action. Nope. So today, on the podcast with Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman, and I listened to about the first 20 minutes of that today. This was all about the Arizona Coyotes. And basically, Elliot says a lot of the stuff in this article we already knew. So we knew about the delayed signing bonuses, the NHLPA having to get involved. We already knew about the late per diems and the bubble. We already knew that players tried ordering pizza and were told no. We already knew a lot of this stuff about what was going on in the Arizona organization. And so basically both Merrick and Friedman back up the article. And Merrick said she's one of the most respected journalists in the field. And that this article was very well researched. They have no reason to think that she didn't talk to 50 current and former employees. Also, Elliot Friedman revealed that he had talked to John Chayka on occasion and that ownership had gone after him. There was information coming out about the Arizona Coyotes, and they basically sat him down and accused Chayka of leaking information to Elliot Friedman to the point where John Chayka changed his phone number. So, again, this is one of those things. See that article? It just basically it's that rock you throw in the water, and now we just watch the waves and we see what comes out. And they even said, with what's in the article, basically anything that's in there, between her and editors and everybody running this, they make sure that she's not publishing anything that they can't back up, that they can't lawyer up for if they need to. There may be other things she didn't report that may come out later. There might be more that's ready to come out regarding the Arizona Coyotes and how business is being done in Arizona. But again, it wasn't really a whole lot of stuff that, for Elliot, like he said, there were a couple of items in there that he had heard through the grapevine that she then backed up and corroborated. So, yeah, a lot of this stuff is out there. And for reporters, they'll hear this through the grapevine. And then it's when you get that corroborating report and you get people that all agree on the story together, that you say, all right, we're going to publish this. And so that's where we're at right now. As for the legal challenge, Elliot said he'd like to see it, but he said that's common. He said the idea that you're ready to publish a piece on a team that's not flattering, it is not uncommon for owners to come out and threaten that they're going to sue you for publishing this information. We've seen in Canada, Eugene Melnyk has numerous times decided to, sometimes for the right and sometimes questionable, threaten the same thing. And that, so owners will do this. And not only that, but he said that it's a common threat to media to be told, I'm going to find out who your sources are and I'm going to fire them. And he wasn't saying that this is what Arizona told her. He's saying he has been told this over the years. He's been a reporter as well. That owners will say, hey, you published that. I'm going to find out who your sources are that told you that, and they're out of here. That's it. I'm done. And there may be cases where that happens, but more often than not, it doesn't. More often than not, that's not the way that works. Yeah, and so we'll see how that turns out. It reminds me of a story. I'm going to go ahead and go on a bit of a tangent. Dean Koontz was my favorite writer when I was a kid and teenager, because I'm that old. And he published sort of an autobiography, and he told a story about how him and his friends, they broke into the school and they made up a spirit day, and so they completely decorated the school top to bottom with like streamers and balloons and everything, right? Broke into the school to do this and everything. So the next day, they find the school's completely made up. So the faculty figured the students did it. The students figured the faculty did it. So they have this big spirit day when they were told to by all this stuff that was put up by Dean and his buddies that were just screwing around, didn't think it would work. And after the spirit day was done, they then went in, took everything down. Again, they break into school to do this. And then they put up a whole bunch of stuff saying spirit day was a failure because of you. Why did you ruin spirit day? You people are horrible. This kind of stuff. And then when everybody came in and saw the school had been decorated again, and that it was just this awful, they realized they'd been duped. So the students and the faculty realized we've been duped. So the faculty gets on, or the principal gets on the loudspeaker, right, and announces to the school, you guys are sitting here until we find out who did this. Nobody's leaving the school until we find out who did this. And then later it was, no, seriously, nobody's leaving until we find out who did this. And for Dean and his friends, they didn't care. They were fine because they knew none of them was going to rat the other one out. They knew that there was really nothing that the principal or that the school could really do. They'd have to punish the entire school. And they got away with it until, of course, he writes his autobiography and that came out. I always thought that story was really funny because it revealed people don't really ask questions about stuff like that. But coming back to where that ties into this article, I am sure that after this article's come out, the Arizona Coyotes would send out a strongly worded email to everybody working there along the lines of, we saw this information, we know that these emails were leaked, and we expect somebody to come forward and let us know the source of this, or we may have to take action. And we don't want to have to investigate further. We don't, and they may be calling people into their office who they think may not be loyal. Look back at the John Chayka bit here, where he's being called in and told off for information being leaked to Elliot Friedman, without it being certain that Chayka's the one leaking it to Friedman. So I'm sure that that's been going on as well. It's just kind of how things work with businesses in general. Something comes out that's negative about the team and about the league in this case. You want to find out where that came from. I don't think they're going to, because generally people don't crack. Generally, when somebody's coming out and they're saying they're going to leak this, they may tell other people, and those other people likely will say, all right, we'll back you on this, and we're not going to say anything. Interesting side note. So the one question that gets asked a lot is why stay in Arizona and why own a team in Arizona? And they asked this on the American and Elliot Friedman 31 Thoughts podcast as well. I thought this was an interesting tidbit from Elliot Friedman that sports betting may very well be why Alex Mariuello currently owns the team and wants to stay owning the team. So he owns the Sahara in Vegas, right? The Sahara Casino. And sports betting is allowed. You can have a license if you own a sports team in Arizona. So in the state of Arizona, you can either run, I think they said, like for the Indian casinos in that area in the state, or own a sports team. So for him, owning a sports team means he has a license for sports betting. He can bring sports betting into Gila River, and sports betting is very lucrative. And part of the reasons the NHL is starting to warm up to it obviously would be a downturn in the revenues due to not having fans in attendance. But even before that, we were hearing a lot about sports betting. If he sold the team, he loses that license. The license is for the Arizona Coyotes. He gets it through the Arizona Coyotes. If he wasn't the team owner anymore, as the official owner of the Coyotes, he no longer would have that right. So I thought that was interesting. Interesting little tidbit to have in there. And that there's a fund from the NHL which may have been misappropriated, which was at the tail end of that article that they talked a lot about between Jeff and Elliot, and they think that might be the biggest problem, is that if they're getting money from the NHL that's through revenue sharing and they're misappropriating that money, that's where you could have yourself a problem with the league. But again, it's all a bunch of ifs, and it feels like that article, it might be a jumping off point. So we'll see, and I'll be here to report on it, whatever happens. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much. Channel passed 180,000 subscribers. I couldn't have done it without all of you wonderful people. And here's to hoping for 180,000 more. I don't know where I'm going to put them. I don't even know where I'm going to put 180,000 of you. We've got room in the shed, but my mother-in-law lives there. So, and she's kind of in there to keep the mice out. So, yeah, but I'll do what I can. Thank you guys so much for all your support, though. I will talk to you again soon.